and we're going to be talking all about pallets today. All right, so it looks like everybody's in, so let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's panel discussion in partnership with Pallet Alliance and Procurement Foundry. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I am the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain and the CEO of Ships, and I will be your moderator for today's discussion. I always enjoy hosting these kinds of discussions because they're a great way to do a much deeper dive into key industry issues. And of course, interact with the audience as well. So today we're talking about the pallet industry, and I am joined by some of its leaders to take a closer look at why paying attention to often what is a bit of an overlooked area can really help to create more efficient, effective supply chains. We'll be taking questions throughout the discussion today, both on the webinar and through our live streams on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. So be sure to comment, send us your thoughts and questions, and we'll discuss many of them along the way. So a warm welcome to our panelists, Jim, Hinton, and Tyson. I'm really looking forward to an interesting discussion about pallets and pallet programs today. So starting with you, Jim, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and the one thing people might not know about the pallet industry?
All right. Hello, everybody. Jim Fechner, United States Gypsum Company, based out of Chicago, Illinois. I am the manager of packaging for North America, which includes, of course, obviously U.S. and Canada. And pallets is one of my largest commodities, other than corrugated packaging and some other various areas. As far as, I guess, one thing people should know about the pallet industry is pallets can be very complicated, or they can be extremely easy and simple if you collaborate and partner with the right people.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, and welcome, Jim. Tyson, over to you. Tell us who you are, what you do, and what's the one thing that might surprise people about pallets.
Sure. Yeah, so Tyson Steffens, I'm one of the 3 owners of the Pallet Alliance. Been in the pallet space for about, I think 18, 19 years now. Originally started as a process engineer, actually for United States Gypsum Company.
Huh.
That's where they taught me all of the great underpinnings that I use today. And I think the one thing that people don't understand about the pallet industry is that even though it's listed as a commodity, it is not standardized. And you really have to look at each situation individually.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And I'm glad that you shared that. I mean, we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into that in the rest of the discussion. So last but not least, Hinton, welcome. Tell us who you are, what you do. And I know you have a really great stat for us today.
Well, I got a couple stats for you, but here we'll go with it. So my name's Hinton Howell. I'm with Cottondale Wood Products, Hinton Lumber Products. We are a regional pallet manufacturer and have done business with the Pallet Alliance and U.S. Gypsum Company for almost 20 years now. And I am the COO of the company and have been in the industry for 25 years. And 2 interesting facts about pallets. One is from an environmental standpoint, a pallet is the second most recycled item behind an aluminum can. Almost 95% of all pallets in the United States are recycled in some form or fashion.
Awesome.
So the other item is that the pallet industry is still extremely specialized. Almost, I think, 40% are standard 48 by 40s, but the remaining 60% are other items. So it's still a fragmented industry in the United States.
So surprising. And Larry, I hope we just answered your question, because he said something about standardized pallets. And I was waiting till you shared that stat to comment on his comment. So let's start with a little bit of context. And Hinton, I'm going to start with you. Can you paint us a picture of the pallet industry traditionally? Like, what did it look like? How did it work? Give us some context.
And I'm going to take you back about 30 years and to the time period now. But the pallet industry was a segmented family mom and pop oriented business. Typically the pallet industry, there was about 3,600 pallet manufacturers almost 25 years ago. And that manufacturer was typically in one town and had one large customer located in that town. And that provider provided for that customer. And it was often 80% of the total sales of that individual company. We have seen considerable consolidation over the past 30 years, more so here recently. Just as any industry, the big guys are getting larger and the small guys are kind of being consumed or going away. The industry was extremely specialized back then. We do see a trend to more less sizes and more collaboration across networks to try to create one standard footprint. Still a real tough road to hoe to try to do that, but we are heading in that direction. From a global standpoint, the rest of the world kind of ships on a block pallet, and the United States ships on a stringer pallet. So we are seeing this tug of war with global trade, that anything that's exported overseas needs to be on a block pallet, but anything in the US needs to stay on the stringer pallet. So I think we're up to about 19% of the US market is block pallets now, and the remaining is stringer pallets. On the world market, you're probably at 85–90% block pallets and 10% stringer. So that's certainly one tug of war that we see over time. As far as the industry and consolidation, you'll see that continue more. One of the largest manufacturers of pallets in our industry was just acquired for some $230 million a month ago. So
wow.
We'll continue to see that type of collaboration or consolidation going forward.
Yeah, and you kind of hit on my next question, because we saw a lot of partnerships and collaboration come out of 2020. You've been talking about more collaboration into the future of the industry, or that's happening right now. And obviously with this panel discussion, the three of you coming together in a collaborative nature as well, because you're in different parts of a pallet program. Tyson, how important is collaboration, and how important is it to the future of, pallet programs, the pallet industry, people looking to purchase and use pallets?
Yeah, I think collaboration is more important than it's ever been, for two reasons, really. One, I don't think that you can get even close to your optimized pallet procurement system without collaboration. And two, the market's becoming much more volatile than it's ever been. And you need the collaboration to work together to handle that. And I think where we've been really fortunate in our space, being a program provider, is that we are able to interact, become partners with folks like Hinton and the end user in Jim, and help understand what it is that Jim needs to provide to his plants, and then work with Hinton to get the best product out of the industry. Because sometimes what is the best product in the manufacturing plant at Jim's end is something that no one's ever asked somebody like Hinton to make. And if we can tease out what that is, we can present it to Hinton, and then we can let Hinton's abilities and his resources go to work, try to provide that, and really bring the best of what both ends of the spectrum have, bring that together to find the best option for pallets and procurement. And by best, we don't always mean cheapest, but we mean the right price with the right quality with the right supply chain security. And that's going to be big. Because, buying from a place that gets one truckload of lumber a week does not have the security as buying from Cottondale Wood Products has.
Right.
So all of these things need to be balanced.
Yeah, and coming up with the right solution, right? You're now looking at it holistically.
Yes.
Whereas traditionally we didn't look at it that way. So we've got a great discussion happening over on the chat. Christopher, I see your question. We're going to leave that question until the end. If anybody has any questions, just a reminder to put it in the Q&A, and we will definitely get to your questions. But hello to everybody out there. So Jim, last but not least, when it comes to context, so where did the tide start to turn? At what point did we start to see people, paying attention to pallets and realizing that it was an area that needed some innovation and streamlining? Why was that? Where did this come from? Why is it so important?
Well, I guess speaking for USG, that really occurred in the late 90s, somewhere around 98, 99. We were not managing pallets on a national level. In fact, all of our plants had local buyers who were basically negotiating and procuring pallets locally from whoever they could meet, who contacted them or was local. Problem with that was that they were buying strictly on price. And the little known fact about that is as you continue to buy strictly on price, eventually your quality is going to suffer. Because pallet guys will do whatever they need to do to meet whatever price you feel is accurate in the marketplace. And over time, we had many of our plants that were getting in pallets that were basically failing. If they weren't failing on the production line, they were failing at the customer's location. And as you can imagine, some of our biggest customers are the big box stores, Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, Sherwin-Williams. When they get product in and the pallet breaks, either while they're handling it or afterwards, there's a huge liability problem. So basically, senior management came to strategic sourcing and said, look, guys, we got a problem. We got to fix this problem. And so that is when we started to get involved and take a really hard look at what we were doing, why we were doing it, and come up with a solution. And that solution was to go with a national program, someone who was a professional in the industry who could not only improve our quality, but as well as our service, but keep our costs basically neutral or lower. And we achieved every one of those goals when we signed up with Pallet Alliance.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting what you're talking about as well, because we're talking about external collaboration and what Tyson and Hinton were talking about, but now you're also talking about internal collaboration and how much your pallet program is affecting sales. It's affecting customer experience. It's affecting last mile and distribution. And so having the right pallet strategy and what we're going to be talking about today is a huge component of having those customers return to buy from you, and part of that customer experience and bringing internal stakeholders together around what you're doing on a pallet level. So let's find out a bit more about what's happening right now. How are you all innovating in the industry? So I'm going to start with Tyson on this one. Let's start with the design itself and the material as well. Let's talk about that.
Sure. So the very most basic principle we're trying to follow is we're trying to produce a pallet that does the intended job to keep the employees safe. And if we can do that and take wood fiber out of the pallet, that's what we're looking to do. The wood fiber is going to be the #1 cost driver of the pallet because it's the biggest cost component. And it's even more complicated nowadays because it used to be about 5 or 10 years ago, you had a pallet and it was either clearly better to build that pallet out of softwood or it was clearly better to build that pallet out of hardwood. The markets are up and down so often that there's a huge gray area now where you could make the argument hardwood or softwood in a lot of cases. And because the markets sometimes move independently, you may find 2 quarters where hardwood is preferable. You may flip for 3 quarters where softwood is preferable. And you need to ask yourself, do you have the ability to go back and forth? If you do go back and forth, how do you go back and forth?
Right.
So there's design in performance. There's design criteria for bringing wood fiber out to save raw materials and cost. But there's also a big design component that we are looking at more and more and comes up in our conversations more and more, which is to provide stability and security to the supply chain. There are times when we can come up with a certain design, but if the market shifts, that design will be left out in the cold, and so will the customer that uses it. So we're looking more and more for designs that can save a little on fiber. They do the job well, but they're also they're very flexible into how we roll them out, where we roll them out, and where we can get them.
Yeah, well, and I think you're probably thinking a lot about recycling and reusability, especially right now. We're getting some questions from the audience in regards to that. Alex, I see your question. So we're going to keep those till the end. We'll talk about recycling and reusability of the pallets a little bit later on in the discussion. If anybody else has any questions, make sure to put it in the Q&A section, just so I can keep on top of any of the questions that come in. So Hinton, I want to send this over to you now because I want to talk about manufacturing and supply. How is that changing right now?
Well, so what we're seeing on the supply side is there's extreme volatility in raw material pricing. Lumber index or lumber futures in the US are up 100% from 12 months ago. And so with low interest rates in the US and home building and remodeling where it is, I mean, basically this COVID effect has locked us in our homes. And instead of spending money on these fabulous vacations, we decided we're going to do honeydew projects at home and fix the house, right? So we've really pressed the lumber market for that, and prices are extremely expensive right now. So what we're trying to do as a manufacturer, we're trying to broaden our procurement range of where we're bringing material in, and that is from overseas, whether it's South America or Europe or wherever. We're trying to offset those internal U.S. costs with overseas markets, and so that's where a lot of our focus is, and we bring product in from all over the world. That allows us, there's another component to that which allows us then to take the manufacturing to the customer, right? I mean, it is my belief that in the future we're going to manufacture closer to the customer instead of manufacturing at our manufacturing hub and ship at a greater distance, right? So we're going to get into kind of some percentages here, but roughly 60 to 70% of the total cost is lumber, 10 to 15% is labor, and the remaining is freight and profit and whatever. All of these components continue to increase, and the only thing that we really can try to mitigate is the increase of lumber as well as the freight component. The labor is going to increase, and we're not going to change that. So what can we do? We can buy international supplies of material and then take the manufacturing location to the manufacturer and set it up closer. That is more of a European model. Pallet companies in Europe are more prone to only manufacturing a pallet, buying 100% of their cut stock in to manufacture the pallet. And where here in the US, we tend to want to cut all of our pieces out of lumber and then manufacture. And that keeps us from being able to take that manufacturing location to the customer because the sawing capacity to cut that material is not easily moved.
Right.
So that's kind of what we see as the future. Now, others will have other opinions, but we certainly see that, and that's what we're implementing within our organization.
Well, and I think that it was great that you were able to provide a breakdown of what the pricing actually looks like and what we're paying for and how you're bringing in, some of those raw materials from overseas. I mean, we've seen challenges with that in 2020. We're seeing some capacity issues there as well, but you're bringing it in, you're able to manufacture it here and just giving everybody an idea of what that looks like and what the costs are. But we're talking also a lot about technology. How does technology play a role in pallets and pallet program?
Well, for us, we're spending our resources on technology. So where we will be in the next few years is we will have robots that actually load the lumber onto the machine. Okay, so we're able to spend the resources on the pallet manufacturing side, not the cutting component side. And we have equipment that is currently being manufactured that would actually take a robot, would gather the lumber, place it into the line, and you would run that equipment with minimal people. Now that technology is not readily available, And it's expensive at this point, but we think that is certainly the long-term play because the labor issue is not going to become cheaper or more available in the future. So
Yeah.
I hope I'm not giving all our strategic strategies away, but I mean, that's kind of what we're doing.
Well, and as you talk about manufacturing closer to the customer, that's when obviously those labor costs really come into play. And I want to see the video of those robots. So when you're ready, let us know. We'll get that video out to everybody. Tyson, is there anything that you want to jump in on here as far as technology from your standpoint?
Yeah, I think from the standpoint of a national program, one of the things that we take pretty seriously is reporting. What we find is that in the pallet space, when people come to us wanting to explore a pallet program, many of them are from very sophisticated, well-funded companies. They have no idea what they buy. They have no idea how much they spend. We've been told times, I don't know, somewhere between 3 and 10 million. Like,
that's a big gap.
Okay, well, as long as you got your thumb on it, that's what's important, And so, what we're really doing is we're aggregating all of that data as we service the plants. So, for instance, if Jim wants to know something about his pallet spend, he can always call us, but also he's got an online Tableau portal where he can go in and he can drill down on a product group, he can drill down on a location, and he basically has 100% of the information associated with his purchases on his program through that portal. And, the reality of the pallet industry, like Hinton said, is it's very segmented. Without that aggregation, you just can't get that reporting in there. And, looking into the future, one of the things that Pallet Alliance has been working on and has achieved is the ability to integrate tracking equipment with wooden pallets. So in IntelliPallet, so we have a number of methods that we can use to track pallets, whether, say you've got a bourbon manufacturer that's suffering loss and they want to be able to track a pallet by GPS to see where that loss is happening. Or you just have somebody that really wants to track over a multi-year period. They want to track their inventory and they want that pallet to check in and check out from one DC to a store to their truck and whatnot. There's a variety of methods and techniques we can use to provide whatever result they're looking for. And as we get into, obviously the supply chain is becoming more complicated. And it's driven by the ability to understand and harness data. So the more data we gather, and that pallet is in a particularly useful location in the pallet chain or in the supply chain, the more information we can get from it, the more we can provide, CIOs information and let them drive process improvement.
So no longer is a pallet just for helping to move products from one place to another. It's now a source of data to be able to help improve supply chains. I love it. I love it. Jim, we haven't been to you in a while, but I'm coming to you with this one because you've got a buyer's perspective. How have things changed on your end? What kinds of things are you looking for when you're looking at your pallet program? Let's break it down for the audience. Maybe somebody's sitting in the audience and thinking, yeah, we have pallets, but what does that mean for me?
Well, I'd say on our end, we've talked a little bit about standardization. Okay, so that is one huge thing that Pallet Alliance has helped us with. We have certain groups of products that we ship on that are virtually the same quantity, the same weight, the same, but produced at multiple plants. And when we first started the program, we discovered that there was literally very little to no standardization whatsoever. So one of our first goals here was to say, okay, this product is always going to be on this size pallet, number one. That's a huge benefit for us. We looked at standardized sizes to reduce cost. That was probably one of the big things, but later on in our program, one thing that we put in play that a lot of companies don't think about is inbound shipments. So product that you're buying from other suppliers coming in on a pallet. Generally, those things come in on a non-standard or a pallet you cannot use. So we developed a program with several of our inbound suppliers to basically use our pallet for inbound shipments built by Pallet Alliance. So we knew it was to spec, we knew the quality was there. When it comes into our plant, we unload it, and then we can literally take that pallet, put it right in our process, and reuse it for outbound. And that, to me, was a huge, huge win for us.
That's a great.
Hey, Jim, Sarah, let me jump in there real quick.
Yeah.
Jim, we shipped a load of those pallets yesterday to one of Jim's pail suppliers. So they manufacture a 5-gallon pail that Jim's company, USG, then puts their material in. It is the same footprint that Jim's ceiling tile pallet that he produces a product on. And so we ship it into that customer. They put the 5-gallon pails on it, deliver it to Jim's site in Mississippi, and they offload those pails and then turn around and take that pallet, put it into their system, reload it, and send it back out. And that vendor initiative is the environmentally friendly thing to do, right? I mean, we basically we repurposed that pallet that could have only been used one time. And so kudos to USG for that.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point, and you actually answered the question that I was originally going to pose, was how does that look like? Like, what are you doing with those pallets? You're delivering them straight to the suppliers, the manufacturers. You know, they're then loading those pallets specifically for Jim's company and sending it to them. So I like that you were able to do that. But I think what you're also talking about is a strong network, right? So in order for a pallet program to work is really a strong network, not only, you know, externally with what Hinton and Tyson can provide, but also with your manufacturers, your suppliers. What does that look like? What can that program do for you? So in saying that, Tyson, over to you on this one. Mm-hmm. Why is building a strong network so important? Give me some examples of that and some of the networks that you're building for your customers.
I think, you know, the necessity of a strong network is it provides more opportunity to you. You know, if you just think about things in very basic terms, do you go out of your way to develop opportunities for people that fight with you all the time? I don't. You know, people that are always suspect of you, do you give them the best part of your time? I don't. As a company, can I afford to spend time thinking 5 steps down the road for somebody that might leave me tomorrow for a nickel? You know, I don't. And I think those just very basic, simple concepts are why the collaboration and the relationships are so strong. We put in a lot of time on things that we have no guarantee to get paid for because our relationship with USG is so good and they are so steady and stable in the way they approach things that I know that if I bring them value, that they will reward that value. So I'm willing to put the extra effort in 5 times, knowing that one time I'm going to come up with something good and that Pallet Alliance will be rewarded for it. And on the same token, you know, we make these relationships with the manufacturers where, you know, you only have so many chances in life to earn somebody's trust and keep it. And I think what we've been able to do in our space in a very good way is we've been able to follow through as close as possible to what we say we're going to do and have earned the trust of a lot of manufacturers, and they've earned our trust as well. So if something should happen, if I call Hinton and say, Hinton, I don't have time to explain, my world has fallen apart. Can I please get 2 truckloads of this pallet? If Hinton can physically get that done, he will do it. And I think one of the reasons he'll do it is if his world falls apart and he says, do you have any resources where you can find this because I'm about to run my customer out of pallets? He knows that the Pallet Alliance will call other people and do everything we can to come to his aid. And I think that kind of trust and cooperation extends to the fact that I can call Hinton and I can tell him about ideas I have to help service somebody like Jim and say, but there's a couple pieces missing from your experience in manufacturing. Can you help me fill in some of these pieces? What is it that I've gotten wrong? And he'll help me, knowing that I'm going to return that favor sometime in the future when he needs the hand. And I would like it to be really complicated and whiz bang and everything, but I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to Jim picking vendors and me picking a person in both directions. And it's convenient because they're to my right and left here, and Hinton carefully choosing who he wants to work with, so that you can say, are these people that I trust? Are these people that I feel good about taking care of? And in a jam, is this a person that I want to take the time to help?
Yeah. And that's
beautiful. It really comes down to that, I think.
Yeah. And it's beautiful, right? Like that's really what we've seen and what we want to see out of partnerships. Jim, I want to go back to you for a second though. How did you get your suppliers on board with this pallet program, where you're delivering pallets into them and they're loading the product onto it? Was there any challenges that you had to overcome? Was there any questions that maybe they had, or any issues that they might have, or concerns that they might have thrown at you when you first went to them with this program?
That's a great question. And there's always a few, it depends on the supplier, obviously, and what their systems look like. But, what we're proposing to someone has to obviously work in their equipment as well. So it's not necessarily an easy fix. We have half a dozen or so, maybe 8 or so suppliers that we're doing this with right now for inbound. There's a heck of a lot more we could potentially do, but there's different challenges depending on what their limitations are as well. But the one that Hinton brought up, that one was a slam dunk. It worked out great. We do a huge amount of business with them, and I'm pretty sure, Tyson, tell me if I'm wrong, that the vast majority of what we get with them all comes in on our pallet now. That's right. Just a huge, huge benefit to us.
Yeah. And maybe Tyson, you want to jump in here on that partnership aspect from, buyer and supplier from a pallet program perspective. I'm just trying to get an understanding also from the audience about, how implementing a pallet program like this, and what are some of the challenges and concerns that you would have to get over to make it successful.
Yeah, sure. And I think one of the best ways for somebody out in the audience thinking about how is it that all these pieces fit together is really to think about the Pallet Alliance. And, and they can do this for other commodities too. It's not just pallets. Is that the Pallet Alliance really works as an extension of Jim. Okay, he's one guy in a group, and he buys millions of dollars of multiple commodities. He can't be an expert in all of them. He can't do all the traveling. He can't make all the phone calls. So, in this specific example with this vendor initiative, what he does is he kind of identifies it. And he says, hey guys, I've got this incoming material. Next time you're in the plant, take a look at how they come in and tell me if you think we can work something out. So then we get back to him. Yeah, Jim, I think this is what it would ride on. I think this would work. He takes care of the introduction with the relationships because they're his vendors. But then what we're also there to do is to help the vendor and take care of any technical rebuttals that a vendor may have of, hey, well, it won't run on my equipment. Well, great. Well, next time I'm down in Southern Georgia, I'll stop by. I'll take a look. I might be able to have a simple fix to make it work in your equipment. So we'll go out and we'll travel to all these sites because we're on the road anyway. And we'll do all that legwork for Jim. And we'll make sure that it is working well for the vendor, because the one thing that's always very impressive about US Gypsum is they never say, oh, great, just stick these guys with whatever pallet you think you can. They always say, make sure that it works well for our vendor. We don't want to punish them for helping us. So we'll go out in the field and we'll make sure it works well. We'll make sure that they get a pallet that meets USG's criteria, but also works in their equipment. So we do that extension that, Jim doesn't have the time and the resources to do himself. We can get that done for him.
Awesome. Awesome. Before we get to the case study, though, I want to ask Jim, before you had this pallet strategy, what did it look like? Like what are some of the challenges that you were having before this pallet strategy that maybe people can resonate with in the audience right now? And what were some of those quick benefits?
Well, number one, I would say we had quite a few quality problems, number one, and quite a few service problems. That was probably the two main things we did. I mean, price is price. Sometimes it's going to be better than others, but to me, number one is you've got to have a quality product, and you got to be able to get it when you need it. So those were two things that we focused on first and foremost. The best way I can describe it is, last year we did about 2.5 million pallets with Pallet Alliance, and you can count the number of actual quality problems and service problems on one hand that we had with these guys. So you can tell that there's a lot of good partnership and collaboration to ensure that, hey, we got a good quality and we're getting good service. And we know for a fact we're competitively priced because we've taken a look at that several times as well. So that to me that's what lets you sleep at night.
Yeah. So let's talk
Sarah,
a little bit more about that.
Let me step in, Sarah, if you
Sure.
get a second there. And this partnership is a little bit unique from the industry standard, and that's what sets Pallet Alliance apart from others. The typical brokered business is there is no collaboration between myself and Jim, okay? It is an independent company that is protecting their buyer from the supplier, all right? And with the three of us now, and it has always been this way, we're an open playbook. There's no secrets, there's no hidden objectives. So we're able to bounce the ideas off like Tyson was saying, but in the typical market, you simply are quoting for price, all right? There are numerous occasions to where material may be tight in the Midwest, and Tyson says, hey, Hinton, I need you to deliver to Kentucky. It's only going to be temporary for the next 6 weeks until we get out of a jam for lumber. So we then would deliver into that region because we may have extra lumber. So what Tyson and the Pallet Alliance does is they first off, they are experts in PDS, which is pallet design software. So they try to minimize the amount of material that is put in the pallet because material is cost, right? And then they go and find the solid producers in that geographical region, okay, that are A, going to have material, B, are going to service and deliver on time. And they're the liaison for USG to those regional suppliers. If you took Tyson out of the picture, Jim would have to add many people on his end to be able to execute the program. So it's outsourcing the purchasing functions and operating functions to the Pallet Alliance. But the key is that Tyson is able to, again, design the pallet so it carries the product, but also can then give that business to solid suppliers that are not necessarily the cheapest in the market, but are the steady suppliers in that region. And that's kind of the secret to this program.
Yep. And I'd like to step in. And Sarah, when we first started this program, we literally traveled to almost every one of our facilities. We visited virtually all of their manufacturers, sat down with them, Hinton would be one of them, and said, look, guys, this is what we're doing. We need you to get on board. We assessed their abilities, what their relationship was, and selected those vendors that we knew were going to support us. And that is, as Hinton said, very unique in the industry. Generally, we wouldn't even know who the manufacturers were. All we would know was that we're buying pallets from Pallet Alliance or whoever pallet program manager that you sign up with, and there's no relationship with the actual manufacturers. I have met the vast majority of these guys I know them personally. I've got their phone numbers if I need to talk to them. Not that I need to call them very often, rarely in a lot of cases, because they know we're committed to them and they're committed to us. And as Tyson said before, that commitment is what makes your business strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Tyson, did you want to sort of wrap things up here on that sort of case study where Jim had these challenges, Hinton has put together exactly what the program looks like, and maybe we talk a little bit about ROI and benefits. I mean, we've talked a little bit about time, maybe travel, so let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, the way we roll a program out is we basically, we'll go out and we'll look at a few sites, for free, just because it's our experience that there's so much to look for and so much to optimize that there's always something meaty in there that's going to benefit everybody. So we go ahead and do that. But I think the real impetus to push one of these programs forward is we can do a lot of projections and we can get a lot of cost estimates and everything, and that's good because you do need to put something concrete down of what you're shooting for and what you think is out there. But I think the real power behind it are buyers that they work for companies that are strong, where they are encouraged to say, I'm not totally in control of this thing over here. So that means I need to put some effort and find a solution to it, to which we're often the solution for pallets. And I think it's part of, you can't really know what the full payout is going to be of the program, but that there's something better. So you kind of take that chance a little bit on the front end of, let's go visit a few sites together. Show me what you guys are looking at. Show me what a plan looks like once you visit a site, because I feel like there's going to be something good in there. And then once that kind of gets ignited, then the rest of it, there starts to be the real money, the real payout that you can look at on paper.
Absolutely. All right. So we are going to get to everybody's questions in just a minute. So if you have any questions, make sure to put them in the Q&A. We've got some questions from LinkedIn. If you have any questions over online, please make sure you put it in the comments, because we're going to get to those in just a minute. I want to talk about the environment, the impact on the environment. Because obviously sustainability, a lot of companies are looking at sustainability goals. They're taking a look at, different aspects of their business, pallets being one of them. So Hinton, over to you. Let's talk about the impact of pallets on the environment. Has it changed? Have we evolved? When do you start innovating with what has traditionally been wooden pallets?
Yeah, so what I would like to mention that our national association, National Wooden Pallet and Container Association, just completed the LCA and EPD of a wooden pallet. That process took almost 2.5 years and quite a bit of money for the funding to be able to go through that. And the results are that the pallet is carbon neutral, and could even be a carbon benefit, because it will store carbon within the wood. So sustainability is one of the hottest items in the industry. It will get quite a bit of focus going forward. Okay, I made mention to the PDS pallet design software as well. That is an association-owned software that analyzes carrying capacity of the pallet. So if Jim and USG says that we want a pallet that we're going to put sheetrock on and our backer board on, and it's going to carry 2,000 pounds, and we're going to stack it 4 high in the warehouse, so that's 8,000 pounds total, the software will analyze that material and say, okay, it will carry this amount of weight. All right. Pallet Alliance comes in with, and Pallet Alliance has arguably the most experienced PDS operators, because he's got 3 guys that worked for Virginia Tech that helped develop the PDS software on staff. And so they analyze it to, again, take out the material within that pallet to still achieve a safe pallet to carry the product from A to B. Okay. Any of that material that we pull out of that pallet is an environmental benefit, right? I mean, it's less material in the pallet. So going forward, you will see sustainability tied with the PDS system. So you will design the pallet to have the least amount of material in it, and then also ensure that the pallet has legs or life after it's used, right? So kind of back to Jim's vendor initiative, he designs that pallet so it'll carry product to his manufacturing location, but he also has to have enough integrity within the pallet to then load his product on and carry it on. So that type of innovation and reuse of pallets after its initial purpose is what is instrumental in part of this is EPD and LCA. So, but to kind of sum that up in a nutshell, the lumber as it's being cut, the tree that we use, it is a byproduct of the higher grade, right? So the really good quality goes to furniture or housing, and the lower quality goes to the industry, the pallet industry. We then produce a product out of that material and supply it to manufacturers that load that product. Then at the end of that, at the end of the life cycle of that pallet, after it's recycled, you then will grind it up and you burn that to generate power. Okay, so when you burn wood, it is carbon neutral, and there is purpose. You're generating power with that fiber. So the cradle to grave, the grave site of that final product is instrumental with it being repurposed to generate power. That's kind of it. I'm sure I've butchered it in my 2-minute explanation, but I'm trying to keep it brief for you and the listeners.
No, I think
get too bored with it.
Yeah, I think it was great, and I think the fact that the wood absorbing the carbon is also something that we don't really talk about, we don't really hear about, and I think that was an interesting stat. And I do have quite a bit of questions around reusability and recycling. So I think what I'm going to do is take some questions now from the audience in regards to that, and then we'll get to the other questions afterwards. So Christopher's initial question regarding your stat, Hinton, because you said that pallets were number 2 behind aluminum for recycling. And I had the exact same question, Christopher, but I'm glad that you asked it. So is that stat only recycling or also reuse? So how much are we seeing on the reuse side?
Well, recycling is reuse. So that 95% is being repurposed to carry another product, right?
Okay.
So those are hand in hand together. I mean, so the pallet, you send it off and use it for one trip, and then it is recovered and then reused again as a pallet to carry more product again. So I don't know if that answered your question, but basically it is recycled and reuse. We term that as the same.
He said, thank you. So I think we answered it for sure,
Okay.
for sure. So Alex had a question. He's saying that we've got a good discussion going here. So thank you, Alex. Have you seen large importers like retailers approach recycling, disposing of the imported, or how have you seen them approach recycling, disposing of the imported pallets? What he's referencing to, he says a large pool programs like CHEP operate as different entities across borders and don't seem to be interested in a global pool. So the retailer may not have the ability to change the provider at the source factory. The quality, a lot of the imported pallets are only designed to hold up for one trip. So that's kind of some context to his question.
What we see as program providers is that burden is largely placed on the importing company. So we have a number of customers that will call us just for help in disposing of pallets. And if those are Euro pallets that come over from Europe, that can be hard because nobody really uses Euro pallets over here. Like Hinton said, we're really a stringer pallet. So what we try to do is we try to redirect those to somebody that's going to export to Europe because that's a great match. A lot of times there are crates that come over from Asia, and they're made out of particle board where there's a lot of artificial glues and binders in there. And people that do have grinding machines and grinding services won't take those because they can't include that in animal bedding. They can't include it in playground mulch. So those are things that almost have to be ground someplace where they have an incinerator that burns hot enough to dispose of the glues. So I think those things are a hardship for people. And so to answer the question, it can be difficult. And B, that burden is really placed on the importing company.
Let me step in as well there. But it's a really good question, and there is quite a bit of pooled pallets. I'm going to say pooled pallets that are being imported in the U.S. with product that the pallet then stays in the United States. It's just not very publicized. Okay, so he's got a really good question, but it happens every day. And not just in pooled pallets, but you have chemical pallets, which are CP pallets. It's a CP1 through a CP9. Those pallets are a global standard. And we export those out of the United States with product on, and they then would get to Europe, and that pallet is repurposed in Europe. So it's a really good question. It happens a lot more than you realize, and it will only continue to increase in popularity with the global trade the way it is. Excellent question. Excellent.
Yeah, and I think the other answer to that is to work with somebody who can help you with that part of the program, right? Make that part of your pallet program. Is really also I think a good answer to that as well. Okay, so over on LinkedIn, Ashiba, are there measures that companies are taking to mitigate the rising costs of pallets due to the costs of lumber? Hinton?
I try to implement those measures every minute of my day. We really do. I mean, it's difficult, I mean, but if you think about it, it's everything, and everything we do in life is more expensive, right? I mean, a stamp is 50 cents now, right? I mean, our milk is more, everything. I mean, and so that is what we were touching on earlier about broadening our procurement web across the world. So yeah, we're bringing material in from other parts of the world to try to offset the domestic price. Lumber is a commodity. It will come down in time. It goes up and it comes back down, but over time we've seen obviously a gradual increase. Short term we've seen a significant increase. So we're trying to mitigate that every chance we can. We're seeing a lot more composite material enter the market. We currently use, composite product now, and that probably is the long-term play to offset some of these ebbs and flows of lumber prices, some type of lumber composite material.
Awesome. That was a great question. Thank you. We've got about 4 more questions. We've got about 7 minutes, and I still have a last final question for you guys as well. So try to keep the answers as brief as we can so we can get to all of them. Brian says, does Pallet Alliance or Hinton have a solution for supply in Mexico or any experience with that market?
We do not currently do any work in Mexico, but the very nature of how we do our work would lend itself well for Mexico. So if there was a project where we felt that we could make a good impact on it, we could definitely get something done with someone in Mexico.
Awesome. So I think, Brian, if you want to connect with Tyson over on LinkedIn, or we're going to be mentioning their website at the end of this, please do so. We've got a couple of anonymous questions. Given the efficiency of the pallet market, can the supply chain sourcing model be applied to other packaging materials? For example, the reuse of containers. Anybody?
I think that I guess the reuse of containers was very specific in a way that kind of stopped me in my tracks a little bit. But I think the general idea that we're talking about here can definitely be used for other commodities, because really what it's about is not chasing price down a rabbit hole to the point where somebody like Jim is at odds with somebody like Hinton. It's really about collaborating on, let's get to the bottom of the price barrel by getting to the highest part of the value stream.
Perfect.
And bringing together what everybody can do, so that instead of Jim and Hinton fighting over a price, Jim and Hinton are working together to create value. I think that's, so yes.
Amazing. Amazing. I love that answer. Okay. Amir over on LinkedIn. How do you align just in time to the pandemic chaos? I mean, what metrics do you use to more or less achieve just in time efficiency?
I think the short answer is that in the pallet world, there really isn't just in time efficiency. And in the pallet world, we are generally, this isn't BMW making cars where there's 5 trucks on the road at any one time and a 6th truck that's loaded in case one of those wrecks. It really is still an industry where it is best practice to have a specific amount of inventory on the ground. So that's not to say that some customers don't get quick shipments, but there is a certain amount of risk associated with that. So I would say that doesn't really impact us in the way that most people think of just-in-time shipment.
I would agree.
And Tyson, that JIT is about a 2 to 5 day inventory at the manufacturer's location.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. In our industry, that's where that backup and that JIT takes place, is at, like Hinton's yard. He's going to have, if you're a big customer, he's going to have components ready to nail, or he's going to have pallets that are already nailed, ready to go.
Awesome. Awesome. Great question. Thank you, Amir. Last one from an anonymous. What is the typical timeline that a mid-size manufacturer should expect when they start to drive pallet standardization?
We've
got about 30 seconds.
Okay. It really all depends on how complicated it is and what you have going on. We can roll out a program that's multiple sites in multiple states, oftentimes in 4 to 6 months, but we can give somebody a picture of what they need to do and what's going to happen probably within 3 to 5 weeks.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So one last question for all of you. Give us, what is one thing that the audience should walk away from this conversation with, or maybe one piece of action that they should take in regards to their pallet and their pallet program? Jim?
To me, I would say if it is a significant component of your responsibility to manage, take a hard look at what you're doing out there. And if you feel like there's some opportunity that you're missing things, and good chance that you are, take a hard look at hiring someone who has some professional experience to really make sure that you're doing it right.
Awesome. Thank you. Hinton, quickly, one thing.
Yeah, I mean, if it's probably more sophisticated or difficult to manufacture a pallet than most people realize. Anytime we have a customer come on site and take a look at the operation, there's a lot of more moving parts than they ever dreamed there really was, especially in a larger scale. So make sure that whoever you do identify as a potential supplier of yours is able to handle the volume and the commitment, because all of that is a real factor in price and service.
Awesome. Tyson, one last thing before we go.
I think in terms of supplying your company with pallets or any other commodity, really, I think it's if you walk away from the procurement function thinking you won, then you've lost, because the point isn't that you're supposed to win. It's that you're supposed to work together to get to whatever the ultimate solution is. So if you're like pumping the fist, like, yeah, I really showed him, you actually didn't.
Great point. Well, that's it for today's panel discussion. I hope you all enjoyed it and gained some useful insights that you can take back to your own companies to help you build a pallet program that helps to bring efficiency, effectiveness, quality, and security to your supply chain. A big thank you to everyone who joined us and asked questions in the webinar and over on social media. And another big thank you to Jim, Hinton, and Tyson for joining us today. Thank you to Procurement Foundry. You can find out more about Pallet Alliance over at the PalletAlliance.com, as well as Procurement Foundry. So procurementfoundry.com. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have an amazing day.